Hello, everyone. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've been here, welcome back. Thank you guys so much for joining me today in this would I call this story time? I wouldn't call this story time. Let's look at it as a motivational piece. So thank you guys so much for coming in and sitting with me today in this conversation of what's in your hand. I took a few notes here that I will be referring to throughout the video just so I can stay on track and really get us to the meat and the juice of the conversation. Okay, so let's get into it. Before we start, it is important to state that, none of us are exempt from the vicissitudes of life. We all will go through a phase, a moment, a season of unexpected happenings, unexpected turn of events, unexpected outcomes. Sometimes it may be unfortunate, but it's a part of the life journey, right? There's a song that I love to listen to, and part of the lyrics are, "It does not matter who you are, this world will leave some battle scars." So I'm going to start off by sharing a story about a friend of mine. I will not say his name for the sake of confidentiality, but a few years ago, a friend of mine went through a very rough patch in his life. His life took a turn of events. He lost his job, lost his apartment, lost a failed relationship, and it was so intense in the way in which things happened that at one point he became homeless and was sleeping in the parks of New York City. I don't want to share too much of his story because I know you all will most likely be hearing it soon from him himself. But this is a man that believes in God also, by the way. And so one day, I'm going to rephrase it for the purpose of this conversation that we're having. One day, God asked him, "What's in your hand? What is in your hand?" And it's important for us to remember that regardless of what happens to us, right? What matters is what happens in us. And at times, things may be taken away. We know in the Bible it says God gives and God taketh away also. And at times, things may be taken away for the next season, the next phase of life that we are to go through. But T.D. Jakes said it best in a devotional that I was reading when he said that our victory is not in what has been taken away, but in what has been left behind. And so God asked my friend, "Hey, what's in your hand?" And in his hand was the pathway. In his heart was the pathway, was everything that he needed to begin the next level, the next season of his life. He was able to tap into himself, tap into his skills, his gifts, his abilities. He was able to partner up with some friends at the time, got into a few gigs, little side hustles, and from the side hustles he was able to acquire some money to start his life all over. And now he is working his own business that he has been working for the past couple years, and it is thriving, and we know that it's only going to get better from there. So from a downturn of events, he was able to think about, listen to the voice of God. Hey, what do you have left over? What do you have left behind? What do you have that you can use to be a blessing to others, and in return, a blessing in your own life? And from that, he was able to flourish. And his story still continues. He's still working the business. He's still got big dreams that are coming into fruition by God's grace in Jesus' name. And so I wanted to share that with us today, so we will all be encouraged when the tough times come, not to worry, because tough times don't last, but tough people do. And so it reminds me of a story in the Bible, Gideon's story. And I would love to share this with you all. Now, I first stumbled up on upon Gideon's story when I was reading a devotional, a Bible devotional. Folks, I'll say it. If you don't have the Bible app, this is not a promotion for the Bible app, by the way, but I just love it so much that I really want to share it with you. If you don't have the Bible app, please go ahead and download it. I will link it below in the description bar for you in case you do not know of which I speak. Download the Bible app, and on the Bible app, they have devotional plans. So if you're a beginner in your faith walk with Christ, and if you are an experienced person in your faith walk with Christ, it does not matter what level you are, but they have devotionals that speak to the journeys of life. They minister to our hearts. They encourage us in so many ways, so many different seasons of our lives that we're able to find new seeds, find new victories through other people's successes to encourage us to keep going. So I was reading a plan recently. The title of the Bible plan was God's Plan for My Life devotional. So the devotional was called God's Plan for My Life. And in the devotional, there were three main points, and then Gideon's story. So the three main points were, point one, always plan to start over. Life is a series of starting over. Each level is new. Learn to start over. When plans change, roll with it. Okay? You never know what God might be up to. Embrace the current season you're in. That's point one, embracing our seasons, not being in a rush to get out and get to the next thing, but embrace the season. God, what are you teaching me in this moment? What are you teaching me in this season of my life? What test have I not passed as yet that I am here again? Help me to listen. Help me to be obedient. So this time I will get it. So in this season, I will learn the skills that are necessary to thrive in the next season of my life. Point two, sometimes we have to say no to good things. I said it. I'll say it again. Sometimes we have to say no to good things in order to say yes to the best things. Eternal God and most righteous loving Father, where should we invest our time in order to have an impact for your kingdom? So sometimes we have to say no to the good things. Something comes our way, man, this looks good. This looks like a good opportunity. But is it the best opportunity for us? And is it the best opportunity in this season of our lives? So sometimes we have to say no in order to make ourselves available to say yes to the best. And we pray to God, we ask God for wisdom in making these decisions in order for us to be able to have an impact. Number three, plan to be creative. Guys, sometimes we got to get creative, and we'll see how to get creative in Gideon's next story. We saw how my friend got creative when he tapped into those skills and abilities that, no matter what comes our way, nothing can take away because God has planted it inside of us. So he got creative. He tapped into his skills to the point where he was able to turn his side hustle into a full-time business. Okay, he got creative. Sometimes we have to plan to be creative. God's plan can sometimes take us down paths we don't expect. How many of us have been in places we don't expect? Okay, or we don't want to be, but that's God's calling on our lives right there. Use the gifts God has given us today. What gifts do we have that we're sitting on? What gifts do we have that we're sleeping on? What gifts do we have that we're like, God, I don't really want to do that, but God has called us for such a time as this to use this gift and ability. I didn't know I would be doing this. I had not planned, but when God speaks, I'm doing my best these days to listen and obey. So don't worry about what others have. Don't worry about what you don't have at the moment. Recognize that what God has given you with his help goes further than we could ever imagine. Okay? So don't look to Mary, Sally, Susie, Peter, Paul, John, Saul, okay, and say, oh, well, she's got that. He's got this. They've already know. With God, little is much when God is in it. Okay, so we trust that He'll take us where we need to be when we're obedient and we're getting creative with the season of our lives that He's placed us in. Well, let's talk about Gideon. If you've not heard about Gideon before, right? I am very new to the story of Gideon, but it excited me so much when I read it in the devotional that I said, oh my goodness, I have to share. And the title came to me, What's in Your Hand, when I saw all that Gideon went through. Here in the book of Judges, chapter 6, verse 11, we find the angel of the Lord appearing to Gideon, who is an Israelite, and is telling him that he's going to help him take back Israel from the Midianites, which is a nomadic army that has taken up residence in their land. So here we find Israel in trouble again. They were in trouble before in Egypt, and Moses rescued them. Joshua led them into the promised land. And now, generations later, we find the Israelites again in trouble, and God waiting for them to change their ways and turn around and ask for help. The Midianites has taken up residence. They have taken up residence in the land of the Israelites, and they are depleting their resources, taking everything from them. And we find some of them have moved into the mountains. They're living in different areas, trying to squeeze the little resources that they have left and hide the little resources that they have left from this nomadic army. So Gideon is in the field somewhere, hiding behind probably some trees or something in a pit, near a pit, and he's getting some grain, and he's hiding in a way that the Midianites cannot see him, and then, take the little that he has left. So he's there, and the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon and said, "Oh, man of great valor," which when we go to verse 12 to 13, we'll see where the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon. And the angel of the Lord appeared and said, "The Lord is with thee, thou man of great valor." And in another version of the text, we see, "The Lord is with thee, O man of great strength." This is what the angel of the Lord says to Gideon. And now Gideon says, who are you? I'm paraphrasing for understanding. Who are you? And man of great strength, are you speaking to me? Because the last time I checked, I was the weakest man in the weakest clan. So how are you telling me that God is with me? And how are you telling me that God is with me when where is God? My people are suffering. I'm suffering. God, I hear about all the great things that God did for my ancestors, led them out of Egypt, led us out of Egypt, led us into the promised land, all these great things that my forefathers told me. But here I am now, waiting for God to show up, and where is God? Now, mind you, the Israelites started to cry out to God during this time. They have realized that they needed God's help based on how the turn of events that had happened in the land, the Midianites coming in and taking up residence. So now they're calling out to God for help. And God says, "Okay, angel, I'm going to send you to Gideon." And Gideon is having all this doubt now because one, they're suffering, and like he said, I saw God show up in the past. I heard about God showing up in the past, but where's God now? That's one. Two, God could have went to anybody else. Why are you coming to me? I'm Gideon. I'm the weakest man in the weakest clan. I'm finding this hard to believe. And so God himself appears to Gideon and says, I find it beautiful. He says, "Gideon, you will be strong because I am giving you the power to rescue Israel from the Midianites." Gideon again expressed his doubts, saying, "But how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest clan. My family has no money. I'm the weakest man in my family. How do you expect me, Gideon, to do all these things that you're saying to me, Lord?" And again, God said to him, "Gideon, you will rescue Israel because I am going to help you. I, the Lord your God, who saved your ancestors in the past, is showing up now to help you now. Defeating the Midianites will be as easy as beating up one man." In verse 16, I love it. Gideon is having doubts when the angel spoke to him. Now God said, "Okay, listen, Gideon, I'm the big man himself. I'm talking to you. Listen, you're going to do And what I'm telling you to do, and you're going to do it successfully because I'm with you. And as we go through the text, we see that Gideon and God goes through this back and forth. Lord, if this is really you, show me. I'm going to do this. You're going to do that. And it's going to be a confirmation to me that you are who you say you are, God, because I'm having doubts. And it's just so beautiful, the dialogue that goes on between God and Gideon, because it shows us that God understands us in our weaknesses. He understands when we have moments of doubt. He understands when we're frustrated, and he puts things in place. Sometimes people that are sent to give us a word, sometimes things happen to show us that confirmation, but sometimes we really have to trust and believe when no one shows up and there are no signs and wonders that God is still in the midst and that he is still working. So early one morning, after receiving confirmation from God, right, this back and forth dialogue, early one morning, Gideon gets together some men. He tells them to go out into the land, send out messages to the allies, and tell them to come together. God has given him a word to defeat the Midianites, and he needs their help. So he gathers a whole bunch of men, thousands in the 5 digits. And here's where the plot twists. Gideon brought a whole bunch of men, and God said, Gideon, your army is too big. I cannot let you win. I cannot let you win with this many soldiers. The Israelites will think they won themselves and that God had nothing to do with it. So God told him to get the troops together, and anyone who has fear or doubts, let them leave and go home. Now we need to downsize, Gideon. If you go in with all the men that you have and I let you win this victory, these men are going to think that they did it themselves. They're not going to realize the hand of God in it. And Israel is going to go back to being the way they were. And God, who should be getting the victory, will not. So I cannot let you win with this many men. We have to downsize. So Gideon tells them, if you feel fear, if you're scared, you're nervous, any of the emotions that we don't need at this time, feel free to go home. And 22,000 men went home, leaving 10,000 behind. 10,000 men. God again said, Gideon, you have too many. With this many men, you still have a chance of winning. If I allow you to win, the folks won't see the hand of God in this. So you need to downsize again. This time Gideon's like, okay, how do you suggest we do that? God said, we're going to take them down to the spring, and I'm going to use something to qualify who gets to go versus who does not get to go. So he took them down to the spring to drink some water, and God said, okay, the men who drink this way, send them home. The men who drink this way, they're good to go. The men that drank in the way in which God made his qualifier ended up being 300 men. So at the end of this qualifying process, 300 men qualified to go with Gideon into battle. Now, 300 sounds like a small number if you ask me. Absolutely. Gideon went from having about 32,000 men, 30-something thousand men, to having just 300 men. And God said, this is enough. That night, Gideon and his 300 men heard a word from God. Gideon heard the word from God that this is the time. Arise. This is the time that we're going to attack the Midianites. And so Gideon got up. He got his men together. He gave them trumpets. Each man had a trumpet, and each man received a clay jar with a burning torch. So they had to get creative. How many times have we had to get creative in our lives when we don't have the things that we would desire, right? So this army, the Midianites, we can only believe if they were so large and they had taken up residence in Israel for so long that the people started to cry out to God. We can only be led to believe that they had all the fancy things that an army should have, that they could defeat the Israelites at any time that they came up against them. But now we have God in the midst. And God has downsized Gideon's army to 300. And not only has he downsized Gideon's army don't have the high-tech gear to go into battle, but God is giving them the power to be creative and to use what they have, use what's in their hands, trumpets and clay jars, to defeat this mighty army of the Midianites. So Gideon divides his men into 300, 100, and he sends them to surround the camp. He said, wait for me. When you hear my signal, you are going to blow your trumpets and you're going to smash your clay jar. So they surround the camp. Gideon gives them the signal. They blow the trumpet with the right hand, smash the clay jars with the left hand. And they did this, and the Midianites arose, because this was sleeping time. They were about to go to bed. It's the nighttime. They arose, they started to scream out, the trumpet started to blow. Gideon troops surrounded the camp and stayed in position. They blew their trumpets again, and as they did, the Lord made the enemy soldiers pull out their swords and start fighting each other. So in the midst of Gideon and his army, Gideon and his clan blowing the trumpets and smashing the clay jars, it caused a confusion amongst the Midianites, and they took out their swords, screaming, yelling, and to the point they were so confused to the point where they started fighting each other. And as they fought each other, they ran. They tried to run, and they ended up running to escape the camp all the way into other parts of the country belonging to somewhere else. And this was how the Israelites were able to defeat the army of the Midianites. It's such a powerful story, right? You would think you're going into battle and you need all these things, but listen, hey, little is much when God is in it. Gideon first thought that, okay, God's going to give me the power, so I need to get all these things together, all these people together. He thought he had the numbers. He needed the large number to win the victory. But God said, no, little is much when God is in it. I don't know if you've heard this before. Small seeds lead to giant trees. Think about a mustard seed and why they say having the faith the size of a mustard seed is so important. A mustard seed is so small, and yet the size of the tree, my goodness, the seed pales in comparison to the size of the tree. And so Gideon had to exercise that faith, right? At first he had that mustard-sized seed faith, but he trusted God enough to know that God was going to come through. And look at what happened. What was in his hand? What was in his hand was his mustard-sized seed faith. What was in his hands was creativity. And what was in his hands was hope that if God did something for my ancestors and he did it back then, he can do it again. So guys, I pray that you're encouraged, just like my friend who's using his gift and talents and abilities, what's in his hand, to create a new life and future for himself with God's help in it. And just like God helped Gideon to defeat the Midianites, I pray that we will see God's hand in everything that we're doing. And also we will see the gifts, the talents, and abilities that God has blessed us with in our hands, and trust and believe that with God in it, we're going to be all right. Be blessed, be prosperous. See you guys soon in another video. Remember to share. Each one, reach one, teach one. And as always, thumbs up and subscribe. Love you guys. See you soon.